Hey, thanks for joining me. I'm glad you're here. I have to breeze through this topic today, but I do want to discuss this with you as I find it very interesting, but I don't have that much time. I'm about to head out to go hiking today, so we'll have to get through this pretty quickly. But a while back, MVG discussed how the Switch would be compatible um, on the Switch 2 using emulation. So the Switch 2 does not have any Switch hardware. It uses emulation or some kind of interesting solution, some mixture of hardware and software in order to emulate Switch. Now, anyone who's ever used an emulator, whether it's hardware or software, is probably already familiar with the fact that emulators can actually run games better or worse than the original hardware that is being emulated. In this case, I suspected that the Switch 2 would actually be able to run original Switch games better. And I was looking for confirmation, hoping that we would see Nintendo confirm, yes, Switch games do run a bit better on Switch 2. And I will link to this article so you can have a read for yourself. The developers that are speaking here are Koichi Kawamoto, Takuhiro Dota, and Tetsuya Sasaki. And if we just scroll down through the article here, we see you mentioned that new technology is used to achieve compatibility, but are there situations where playing Switch games on Switch 2 will enhance the gameplay experience? And the interesting part here comes from Dota's answer. When we tried running Switch games on Switch 2, there were some where loading times became faster or game performance became more stable. So we realized that the overall gameplay experience could improve, and as mentioned previously, game chat will also be available for Switch games that are played on Switch 2. Even for previously released games, there are opportunities to add value in the sense that it can enhance and change the gameplay experience. We understand that people buy new hardware so they can play new games created for it, so we've developed Switch 2 with that in mind. So this is fascinating. Well, one, I'm less interested in this. It says that game chat will be available. Basically, whatever game you play, even if you're playing original Switch games, you can use game chat to still talk to people. So game chat is basically, universal, baked into the firmware of the Switch 2. But I am interested in this. The loading times became faster or the game performance became more stable. This is because the Switch 2 is running on much stronger hardware. And this is a situation we've never seen before. We have never seen a situation where a Nintendo console was able to emulate a game from a previous Nintendo console and play it better with better loading, better frame rates. And that's because there's pretty much any backward solution, any backward compatible solution in the past has been due to having hardware on the console itself. So for example, the 3DS had DS hardware on it, so it was able to play DS games. The DS had Game Boy Advance hardware on it, so it was able to play Game Boy Advance games, and it was 1-to-1. It was as accurate as it could be because it was like playing the original console. Of course, we had Virtual Console on the 3DS and Wii U, where software emulation was used to play the games, but those were as faithful as they could be, basically. This is a situation where the Switch 2 isn't exactly able to perfectly recreate the environment for running the Switch, and the solution that these developers have come up with actually allows the Switch games to leverage the increased power of the Switch 2. And that's so exciting to me. As a game developer, this is so fascinating to me. I love seeing like this. I love hearing about the technical stuff. I don't fully understand the technical stuff. That's a little bit outside, a little bit. It's totally outside of my wheelhouse when it comes to the hardware stuff. I just develop games. I don't really have an understanding of the hardware, but it's fascinating to me. And this is great news. This is what people were wondering would be the case, and we have confirmation. We do not know exactly how much better games will run. So here's what we won't see. If you take your Switch game and it's just a Switch game, you run it on the Switch 2, you won't see things like suddenly it's running in higher resolution. Say, for example, some of the games that I've created, some of them have visuals that are a little bit heavy for the Switch, and so the internal rendering resolution of those games has to be lowered. Like Secret, I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but some of my games, you can run them, you can change the settings in game by pressing the minus button. I think one of them can run as low as 540p, and then the game uses a processing stack to try and smoothen that out a little bit. If you were to put that game on the Switch 2, it's still going to run at that lower resolution internally because the game was programmed to run at a lower resolution. So you won't see your Switch games suddenly running at a higher resolution. Whether the Switch 2 uses built-in DLSS AI upscaling for the Switch games, we haven't seen confirmation on that exactly, not to my knowledge. But it seems like the frame rate is going to be better because there are loading times. The loading times are faster. We may see games where, the Batman Arkham City, where you're driving your Batmobile and it's really, really struggling to have any frames at all and it's stuttering. That's something that might be improved on the Switch because that stuttering occurs due to having to load in assets while you are playing the game. They say that the loading times are faster. Okay. The Legend of Zelda. Oh no, I almost said Wand of Gamelon. I don't know why. I don't know why I almost said that. Um, um, there's certain Zelda games where you're exploring the environments and it stutters a little bit. And with this, because it says that the loading times are faster, that stuttering may be gone. Game performance should be more stable. So especially the top-down style Zeldas that are on the Switch, there were frame rate drops and hiccups that most likely will be gone simply due to the brute force. Now there will be free upgrades for the Switch 2. The reason why Nintendo is doing free upgrades or any upgrades at all for certain games is most likely to take advantage of higher resolutions so the games can run at higher resolution and so they can implement HDR. HDR stands for high dynamic range, and it basically means you can have more detail in the bright parts of the scene and more detail in the dark parts of the scene. So if there's any bright sources of light and some really dark shadows, you'll be able to see more detail in there. It doesn't really change the gameplay experience. You wouldn't notice the difference unless you saw the image side by side with and without. So it's not a huge deal, but it's nice to have HDR. That's what I wanted to discuss today. So I find that very interesting. Are you guys jazzed for this? Are you as jazzed as I am? I am ecstatic, over the moon. I just want to run a bunch of original Switch games on Switch 2 and just see how much better they run. Cool. I have to run. I gotta catch up with a buddy of mine, and we're going hiking. Okay, I'll see you around. Thanks for looking at this cool stuff with me.